The wind carried a low, aching whistle through the valley as Hannah Reed stood before the empty stables, their wooden doors swaying on rusted hinges. Dust clung to every surface, muting what was once a place of motion and laughter. Her boots sank into the brittle earth, where horses had once thundered. The sign nailed to the front gate, "For sale," flapped limply, as if mocking her with every gust. She had built this place with her own hands, spent years turning her father's worn acres into a sanctuary for broken horses. Now it was nothing more than a graveyard of memories. She didn't cry anymore. Tears had long abandoned her, worn away by months of humiliation and disbelief. The world had believed a lie, and that lie had cost her everything. She touched the splintered gate, her fingers tracing faded initials carved years ago. HR beside CJ, a symbol that once meant trust. Now it burned like betrayal. Her phone buzzed inside her jacket, pulling her back into the present. It was a message from the bank. Final notice. The last thread of her old life was about to snap. She silenced the phone without reading the rest. She already knew how it ended. A truck roared past on the dirt road, scattering gravel across the dry grass. She turned slightly, shielding her face from the dust. A familiar pain twisted in her chest, the same ache that had followed her since that day a year ago when the headlines first spread like wildfire. Trainer accused of neglect, champion horse found dead. She remembered standing outside her ranch, surrounded by flashing cameras and angry voices. They wanted a villain, and she was easy to blame. Cole Jensen, her business partner, her lover, had made sure of that. He'd planted the story, falsified records, and vanished with the sponsorship money while she faced the fallout alone. Even now, she could still hear his voice, soft and poisonous. "It's nothing personal, Hannah. Just business." Those words had gutted her more than any public humiliation ever could. In the months that followed, she lost her license, her students, her friends. People she had trained beside for years turned their backs without hesitation. Some refused to even meet her eyes when she passed them in town. To them, she was the woman who let a horse die for fame and money. There was no defense strong enough against a lie that everyone wanted to believe. She tried to rebuild, taking work wherever she could, cleaning stalls, feeding horses, sleeping in her truck when she couldn't afford rent. The rhythm of stable life still lived in her body. The early mornings, the hay's rough scent, the quiet power in a horse's breath. But it wasn't hers anymore. She was just a shadow in someone else's barn, invisible, dispensable, tolerated out of pity. That morning had been another string of small humiliations. The stable owner, a woman half her age, had corrected her in front of the apprentices. Hannah hadn't argued. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. She'd simply kept her head down, finished her work, and left before the whispers started again. Now, standing before her deserted ranch, she wondered what was left to save. She walked through the open barn doors, the hinges groaning in protest. Dust swirled in the light streaming through cracked windows. The smell of old straw filled her lungs, faint, ghostly. She could almost hear the soft nickers of horses greeting her, the scrape of hooves, the rustle of feed. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. "Every animal has a truth, Hannah. You just have to listen long enough to hear it." He died before he could see what she'd built here, before she'd ruined it all. She reached the last stall, the one where her favorite mare, Juniper, had once stood. The memory came without warning. The smell of medicine, the sound of labored breathing, the panic in her chest as she'd realized she couldn't save her. Juniper's death had been the spark coal used to ignite everything. He'd told the sponsors Hannah's negligence caused it. They'd believed him. Everyone had. She sank to her knees, pressing her forehead against the stall door. The air was cold and dry, and the weight of failure settled heavy in her bones. How long could she keep pretending she was still a trainer? How long before she stopped pretending she was even alive? Outside, the day was dying, a smear of crimson light fading behind the trees. She locked the barn and trudged toward her truck. The silence of the valley pressed close around her, broken only by the hum of insects and the creak of the sign swinging in the wind. Her phone buzzed again. She almost ignored it, but habit made her look. An online auction listing glowed on the cracked screen, a local feedlot clearing out unwanted horses before shipment. The title read, "Kill Pen Last Call. Pick up by tomorrow." She scrolled without interest until one image made her stop. A gray mare stared back at her from behind rusted rails. Her coat was patchy, ribs visible through dull hair, eyes wide and hollow with terror. Something about that gaze froze Hannah in place. It wasn't just fear, it was defeat. The same quiet resignation she saw every morning in the mirror. She read the small caption, "Unbroke, aggressive, unfit for adoption." The starting bid was $200. No one had placed one yet. She zoomed in, studying the mare's face, the faint scar beneath her left eye. The image blurred as Hannah blinked hard, her throat tightening. She didn't need another responsibility, didn't need another failure. But she couldn't look away. The clock in the corner of the screen ticked down, 3 hours until the auction closed. She stared at it for a long time, her mind warring between reason and something deeper. Logic told her to let it go. She had no money, no resources, no space for a wild, damaged horse. But her heart, raw and stubborn, whispered something else. By the time the second hand reached its next mark, she was already grabbing her keys. Her old truck groaned as it started, headlights cutting through the dusk. The gravel crunched under the tires as she pulled onto the main road, the image of the gray mare burned behind her eyes. The drive to the auction yard was long and winding. Darkness gathered like a storm over the horizon. She didn't turn on the radio, the silence was enough. Her fingers clenched the steering wheel as her mind replayed the worst of the past year, the courtroom, the accusations, the loneliness. Maybe saving that horse wouldn't fix anything. Maybe it was just another reckless impulse. But something inside her whispered that this wasn't about fixing, it was about beginning again. Rain started to fall halfway there, light at first, then harder. The windshield wipers squeaked across the glass in a slow, rhythmic beat. She drove on, eyes fixed ahead. The road was slick, the air thick with tension. When she finally pulled into the dimly lit lot, the place looked like a nightmare. Rows of trembling horses crammed into pens, the stench of fear and manure mixing with diesel fumes. Men shouted numbers as the auctioneer's voice droned through the rain. Hannah stood frozen for a moment, the weight of it pressing into her chest. Then she saw her, the gray mare, drenched and shaking, ears pinned flat. Their eyes met across the chaos, and the world narrowed to that single, fragile connection. Without thinking, Hannah raised her hand. "For 100, she said, her voice barely audible over the storm. The crowd turned briefly, then looked away. No one else bid. The gavel struck wood with a dull crack. "Sold." The sound echoed like a heartbeat in her ears. She exhaled shakily, rain soaking her hair, her jacket, her soul. For the first time in a long while, she felt something other than regret. It wasn't hope yet, but it was close. The rain had not stopped by the time Hannah backed her truck to the small loading ramp. The auction yard was nearly empty now, save for a few men finishing their business under the flicker of floodlights. Water pooled beneath the pens, turning the ground into a thick, sucking mud. The air stank of wet hay and diesel, of fear and resignation. Hannah stood still for a moment, letting the rain wash the grime from her face, steadying her shaking hands. The adrenaline that had carried her here was fading, leaving behind a dull tremor in her chest. Somewhere beyond the metal gates, the gray mare waited, her new responsibility, her new mistake, maybe both. A handler appeared from the shadows, cigarette glowing between his lips. "You the one for the gray?" he asked, voice flat with exhaustion. Hannah nodded, signing the paper he held out. Her signature looked strange, foreign, like a name belonging to someone else. The man flicked his cigarette into a puddle and disappeared down the line of stalls. The sound of hooves followed, sharp and uneven, until the mare emerged through the rain. She was smaller than Hannah remembered, thinner too. Every rib showed, and her coat, once silver white, was caked in mud. Her eyes darted wildly, nostrils flaring, as she fought the lead rope. "Easy," Hannah whispered, holding out her hand. The mare snorted and jerked back. A sharp jolt of fear shot through Hannah, but she didn't move. She'd seen fear like this before, in animals broken by pain, in people crushed by lies. The handler shoved the rope toward her impatiently. "You'll want to keep clear of her. That horse." Hannah took the rope anyway. The coarse fibers bit into her palm as Luna pulled away again. The name formed silently in her mind, Luna. She didn't know why she thought of it, maybe because the mare's coat, even in filth, carried a faint moonlit hue. The name felt right, fragile but alive, like something worth saving. Loading her was a battle. Luna fought every step, hooves slamming against the metal ramp. Hannah's boots slipped in mud as she coaxed, pleaded, and finally waited, silent and patient, until the mare took a hesitant step forward. It took nearly half an hour before the trailer door clanged shut behind them. By the time it did, Hannah's arms ached and her throat was raw from whispering comfort into the storm. The drive home was slow. The rain blurred the world into streaks of gray, the wipers keeping time with Hannah's thoughts. She kept glancing in the rear-view mirror, catching glimpses of Luna's shifting silhouette. Every time thunder rolled, the mare kicked once, then fell still again. Hannah spoke softly to her through the open window. "It's all right now. You're safe." The words sounded empty, like a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. When she reached her ranch, the headlights swept over the sagging fence, the leaning barn. The place looked worse than ever in the storm. Water streamed down the dirt driveway, pooling near the paddock. Hannah backed the trailer close to the barn door and killed the engine. For a long moment, she sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring into the darkness. She had no plan, just a terrified horse, a crumbling barn, and a heart too stubborn to quit. The wind howled as she stepped out. She unlatched the trailer and opened the ramp. Luna stood trembling, eyes rolling white, tail plastered against her hindquarters. "Come on, girl," Hannah murmured, standing to the side, letting the rain pour over them both. Luna hesitated, muscles quivering, then finally stepped down, hooves sinking into the mud. Inside the barn, Hannah led her to the old corner stall, the one that had once belonged to Juniper. The irony cut deep. She'd promised herself she would never keep another horse there, that she wouldn't reopen the wounds of the past. But there was nowhere else to go. She tossed down a few flakes of hay and filled a bucket from the rain barrel outside. Luna ignored the food, pacing the stall, snorting with every sound of thunder. Hannah leaned against the wall, exhaustion pulling at her limbs. The lantern light flickered, throwing long, soft shadows across the wooden beams. She studied the mare's every movement, the twitch of her ears, the tension in her shoulders, the whites of her eyes. Fear had made her wild, but beneath that wildness was something else, an unspoken plea to be left alone, yet not abandoned. Hannah knew that feeling too well. Hours passed before Luna quieted. The rain softened to a drizzle, tapping gently against the roof. Hannah sat on an overturned bucket, arms wrapped around her knees, listening to the rhythm of the mare's breathing. For first time in months, she felt a strange calm settle over her. Maybe this was madness, rescuing a broken creature when she herself was barely standing, but felt right in a way nothing else had since the lie destroyed her life. By dawn, the storm had passed. The valley glowed pale gold beneath thinning clouds. Hannah dragged a bale of hay to the paddock and spread it, then opened the stall door. Luna hesitated, sniffed the air, and stepped out slowly. The sunlight caught her mane, revealing a shimmer of silver beneath the grime. She lifted her head, ears twitching, and for an instant looked almost regal. Hannah smiled faintly. "You're beautiful, you know that." Luna flicked her tail and turned away. The day was spent repairing fences and clearing the paddock. Hannah worked until her muscles screamed, the physical labor numbing the noise in her mind. Every few minutes, she glanced at Luna grazing warily near the fence, ready to bolt at any movement. When Hannah tried to approach, the mare retreated, eyes wide. There was no trust yet, only fragile coexistence. That evening, Hannah leaned on the fence, arms folded. Luna watched her from a distance, chewing slowly. "I know what they did to you," Hannah said softly. "People break things they don't understand. But I won't hurt you. I just need you to give me time." Her voice cracked at the last word. She turned away quickly, ashamed of the tears she hadn't meant to shed. Days slipped into a quiet rhythm. Hannah fed Luna, cleaned the stall, mended the barn roof, and spoke softly to the mare each morning. Progress came in fragments. A glance held a second longer, a breath shared through the stall bars. Luna still refused touch, still flinched at every sudden sound, but her eyes no longer carried pure terror. They held suspicion now, and beneath that, the smallest flicker of curiosity. One afternoon, while refilling the water trough, Hannah left the gate open longer than she should have. Luna wandered closer, nostrils flaring, as she sniffed the air near Hannah's shoulder. Hannah froze, resisting the instinct to reach out. A minute passed, then another. Luna took one step closer and exhaled softly, the warmth brushing against Hannah's sleeve. It lasted only a second before she pulled away, but it was enough. That night, Hannah wrote the word Luna on a scrap of paper and pinned it above the stall. The name looked solid there, grounding, as though it gave both of them a purpose. She fed the mare an extra handful of hay and stayed beside her until the barn lights dimmed. Before heading inside, she stood at the doorway, looking out across the dark fields. The moon had risen, round, silver, and whole. Luna lifted her head, ears pointed toward it, as if recognizing something familiar. Hannah followed her gaze and whispered, "Maybe we both needed saving." The air was cool, the silence deep. For the first time since her life had fallen apart, Hannah felt the faint, uncertain pulse of hope. Not redemption, not yet, but the beginning of it. She turned toward the house, leaving the barn light burning behind her, a small beacon cutting through the dark. The sun rose through a soft mist, spreading thin gold light across the valley. Dew clung to the grass like tiny jewels, and for the first time in months, Hannah woke before her alarm. The silence felt different, alive, filled with purpose instead of dread. She pulled on her worn jacket and stepped outside, her breath misting in the cool air. Luna stood in the paddock, ears flicking at the morning bird song. Her coat had begun to shine again under Hannah's care, and though her body still carried the sharp lines of starvation, there was new strength in her stance. "Morning, girl," Hannah called softly, carrying a bucket of grain. Luna raised her head but didn't back away. That small change warmed Hannah more than the rising sun. She poured the feed into the trough and leaned against the fence, waiting. Luna approached slowly, nostrils flaring, then lowered her head to eat. The sound of her chewing was steady, comforting. Each day, since that stormy night, had been a small battle between fear and patience. The mare was no longer violent, but her trust came in fragile increments, a nudge of curiosity one day, a flinch the next. Hannah had learned not to rush. She moved slower now, spoke less, breathed evenly when Luna's ears flattened or her muscles tensed. It was as though the horse was teaching her to exist in the present, to let silence do what words could not. By mid-morning, the valley hummed with life. Hannah repaired the fence near the south pasture, while Luna grazed within view. Her hands worked mechanically, muscle memory guiding her, but her mind wandered. It still drifted uninvited to the past, the courtroom, the reporters, the disbelief in her mother's eyes. No one had wanted to hear her truth back then. Cole's version had been simpler, more dramatic, the kind of story people liked to believe. He'd blamed her for the horse's death to hide the fact that he'd been doping their competition stock. When the mare collapsed before the championship event, the tests revealed banned substances, and the sponsors had pulled their funding overnight. Cole had disappeared with the money, leaving her to face the fallout. She clenched her jaw and drove another nail into the post. The sound of the hammer echoed across the pasture. Luna raised her head, ears flicking toward the noise. Hannah paused, softened her movements, and the horse returned to grazing. "I'm sorry," Hannah murmured, though she wasn't sure who the apology was for, the mare herself or the ghosts of everything she'd lost. That evening, she brushed Luna for the first time. The mare stood in the stall, tense but not defiant, her breath quick and shallow. Hannah moved slowly, letting Luna see the brush before touching her shoulder. The first contact made Luna flinch hard, jerking away, but she didn't bolt. Hannah waited, steadying her heartbeat. "It's just me," she said quietly. Her voice, soft and rhythmic, filled the space like a lullaby. She began again, gentle strokes along the mare's neck. Dust lifted into the lantern light, and Luna's muscles relaxed little by little. When Hannah finished, she noticed the mare's eyes had softened, lids drooping slightly in calm. Days bled into weeks. Each morning followed a ritual: feed, clean, brush, walk, talk. Luna began following Hannah around the paddock, curious, alert. There were still moments of panic, a sudden noise, a shifting shadow, but they passed quicker now. Hannah's patience was becoming her strength again, the same quiet endurance she'd lost when the world turned against her. The ranch, too, began to transform. She repaired the roof, fixed the gates, cleared the weeds. The work was hard, but it filled the hollow spaces in her. One afternoon, a truck pulled into the driveway. Hannah froze when she recognized the logo on the door, County Equestrian Board. A man stepped out, clipboard in hand, his official vest damp with sweat. "Hannah Reed?" he asked. Her heart thudded. "Yes. I'm here for an inspection. Routine check for livestock conditions." His tone was polite but guarded, the way people spoke to her now, careful, as if her name carried contamination. She led him through the barn, answering questions, showing records. Luna watched from the paddock, ears pricked. The inspector noted her weight, examined the feed supply, and took photos. Finally, he closed his folder. "Everything looks fine," he said. His expression softened slightly. "Good to see you're back on your feet, Ms. Reed." Hannah nodded, but her throat felt tight. As the truck drove away, she leaned against the fence, shaking. It had been years since anyone had said something kind without suspicion. She looked over at Luna, who stood calmly under the shade tree, and whispered, "Maybe we're both learning to be trusted again." Later that week, while sorting supplies at the feed store, Hannah overheard two riders talking near the counter. "Did you hear?" one said. "They're reopening the Spring Valley exhibition next month. First time since the scandal. Cole Jensen's name is on the sponsors list." The word struck like a blow. Hannah stood frozen, a sack of oats balanced in her arms. She hadn't heard his name spoken aloud in over a year. The other rider laughed softly. "Wonder if that Reed woman will crawl back out to watch." Hannah turned away before they could notice her expression. She finished paying, drove home in silence, and sat in her truck long after parking. The sun was setting, the light fading over the fields. Luna lifted her head when she saw Hannah, but stayed near the fence, tail flicking lazily. That night, sleep refused to come. Hannah lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind circling the same question: what would it mean to face him again? She told herself it didn't matter. She wasn't that woman anymore. But deep down, she knew the lie still held power over her. Until she faced it, until she proved, if only to herself, that it didn't define her, she would always carry its weight. The next morning, she began training Luna in earnest. At first, it was simple groundwork: haltering, leading, yielding to pressure. Luna resisted, eyes wide with fear, but Hannah's patience never wavered. She spoke softly, rewarded every small step forward, ignored every backward one. Trust was fragile, but grew like sunrise, slow, inevitable. Weeks turned into a rhythm of effort and understanding. One day, Luna let Hannah slip the halter on without flinching. The next, she followed her around the paddock in smooth, measured steps. Their movements synchronized over time until they seemed to anticipate each other's rhythm. Then came the real test. A gust of wind tore loose an old tarp from the fence. It whipped across the field with a sharp crack, and Luna bolted instantly, eyes wild, galloping toward the far corner of the paddock. Hannah's heart lurched. She grabbed the rope but stopped herself before chasing. Instead, she stood perfectly still, breathing evenly. "Luna," she called, her voice firm but calm. The mare circled, trembling, then slowed. "I'm not going anywhere," Hannah whispered, taking a slow step forward. The tension hung thick between them, broken only by the wind. Luna's nostrils flared, her muscles quivering, but she didn't flee. Inch by inch, she came closer until her muzzle brushed Hannah's hand. The moment was brief but powerful, a bridge built not from dominance, but understanding. As the sun dipped behind the hills, painting the fields in copper light, Hannah stood beside Luna, her fingers resting against the mare's neck. The fear in both of them had shifted into something gentler, something that felt like trust. In that quiet evening, she saw it clearly: the connection between them wasn't just survival. It was healing. Luna was teaching her to forgive the world, to forgive herself. Hannah looked toward the distant road, where the exhibition banners would soon hang, the name Cole Jensen bold among them. The thought no longer filled her with dread, but with resolve. She turned back to Luna, who stood steady beside her, and smiled faintly. "We've come a long way, haven't we? Maybe it's time to show them what second chances really look like." The mare snorted softly, as if in agreement. The sky deepened into twilight, and the first stars blinked above the dark ridge. For the first time, Hannah didn't feel small beneath them. She felt ready. The morning of the exhibition dawned clear and sharp, sunlight pouring through a pale sky that held the faintest promise of spring. Hannah stood by the paddock, her gloved hands trembling slightly as she tightened Luna's bridle. The mare stood still, calm but alert, her dark eyes reflecting the same steady focus that Hannah fought to maintain. Months of quiet labor, patience, and faith had led to this day. The thought of setting foot in front of the same crowd that once condemned her sent a cold current through her chest, but retreat was no longer an option. She had entered Luna into the novice reconditioning class, not a grand event, but a symbolic one. It wasn't about winning. It was about proving that broken things could heal, that truth could survive silence. Still, as she led Luna toward the trailer, Hannah's breath hitched at every sound: the rustle of the flag, the creak of the gate, the distant hum of vehicles gathering at the fairgrounds. Each noise pulled memories from the shadows of her past: whispers in stands, camera flashes, Cole's easy smile as he told lies the world was eager to believe. By the time they reached the grounds, the fair was alive with noise and color. Banners rippled above the stables, the air thick with the scent of hay and anticipation. Hannah parked near the far edge, away from the crowd, and opened the trailer door. Luna stepped out gracefully, head high, mane brushing her neck like silk. She looked every bit the horse Hannah had dreamed she could become, strong, steady, and unafraid. People turned to look. A few recognized her. She could see it in their eyes. Recognition turned quickly into murmurs. Some pointed, some whispered. Hannah kept her gaze forward. She had rehearsed this moment too many times to falter now. Every step was deliberate, every breath measured. She guided Luna into the warm-up pen, ignoring the flicker of judgment that followed her like a shadow. Then she saw him. Cole Jensen stood near the main arena gate, his posture confident, his suit crisp, a polished smile fixed in place as he shook hands with sponsors. Time hadn't softened him. His presence hit her like a sharp wind, unexpected yet familiar. He noticed her almost instantly, the faintest trace of surprise breaking through his composure. Their eyes met across the distance, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed to still. Then he smiled, calculated, insincere, and turned away to speak to someone else. Hannah's pulse thudded in her ears, but Luna shifted closer, brushing against her side. The simple touch steadied her. "It's all right," she whispered, gripping the reins. "He doesn't matter anymore." She led Luna into the arena when their number was called, the gates swinging shut behind them with a heavy metallic sound that echoed in her chest. The ring was quiet but expectant. Rows of faces lined the fence, their expressions a blend of curiosity and skepticism. The announcer's voice drifted through the speakers, introducing Hannah Reid, the same name that once filled headlines. She felt the weight of it pressing down, but she held her posture, squared her shoulders, and breathed. They began the routine slowly. Luna moved with cautious precision, her muscles taut under Hannah's gentle guidance. Each step was deliberate, each turn balanced between control and trust. The rhythm they had built over months unfolded like a conversation, silent but rich with understanding. When Luna hesitated at the first obstacle, Hannah didn't force her forward. She waited, patient as always, hand resting lightly against the mare's neck. The crowd murmured, unsure, but Luna took the step herself, clearing the barrier with grace. A ripple of applause followed, small but sincere. Hannah felt something in her chest loosen. They continued, weaving through cones, crossing poles, responding to subtle cues. By the final lap, the tension had shifted into harmony. The same horse once feared and wild now moved with fluid confidence, guided not by fear but by trust. When the final whistle blew, Hannah slowed Luna to a walk, her eyes stinging with emotion she hadn't dared to name. The applause was louder now, genuine, scattered but growing. As they exited the ring, she caught sight of Cole watching from a fence, his expression unreadable. For once, she didn't look away. She met his gaze squarely, her chin lifted, a silent acknowledgement that she was no longer the woman he'd broken. Outside the arena, a few people approached, soft-spoken writers, curious journalists, even a member of the judging panel. They complimented Luna's recovery, her composure, her transformation. Hannah accepted their words with quiet gratitude, but her mind was already elsewhere. She had no need for trophies or headlines. The real victory had already taken place months ago, in the quiet of her barn, when Luna had taken that first hesitant step toward trust. As the afternoon waned, clouds gathered over the hills, their shadows stretching across the field. Hannah walked Luna back to the trailer, feeling the calm after a long storm. Yet as she prepared to leave, a familiar voice stopped her. "Hannah." She turned slowly. Cole stood a few paces away, his hands in his pockets, his polished charm slightly cracked. "You did well out there," he said, tone smooth but cautious. "Thank you," she replied evenly, tightening Luna's lead rope. He studied her for a moment, then sighed. "You know, none of that mess had to happen the way it did. We both made mistakes." Hannah's jaw tightened. "No," she said quietly. "You made choices. I paid for them." His smile faltered. "You still holding on to that?" She took a step closer, her voice calm but steady. "I'm holding on to the truth. That's the difference." She turned back to Luna, running a hand down the mare's neck. "You should go. The cameras love you, remember?" For once, Cole had no reply. He hesitated, then walked away, his footsteps fading into the noise of the fairground. Hannah watched him disappear into the crowd, a strange sense of peace settling over her. The anger she'd carried for years no longer burned. It had turned to ash, weightless and gone. The wind shifted, carrying the faint smell of rain. Luna nudged her shoulder, and Hannah smiled, scratching the mare's jaw. "Let's go home," she whispered. As they drove away, the fairground faded in the rearview mirror, replaced by open fields and rolling hills. The road stretched long and quiet ahead, golden lights spilling across the horizon. Hannah lowered the window, letting the cool breeze sweep through her hair. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was running from something. She was moving toward something new, something her own. When they reached the ranch, dusk was settling in. Hannah led Luna back to the paddock, unfastened the halter, and watched as the mare trotted out into the open field, free and radiant under the last glow of sunlight. Hannah leaned against the fence, her heart steady. The scars of her past would always exist, but they no longer defined her. She had found her way back, not through revenge or vindication, but through patience, kindness, and the quiet power of trust. Behind her, the house windows glowed softly in the gathering dark. The air smelled of rain and earth and new beginnings. Somewhere beyond the hills, the world carried on with its noise and judgment, but here, in this small piece of land reclaimed from ruin, peace had finally taken root. Hannah looked toward Luna, who turned her head as if sensing the gaze. Their eyes met across the distance, woman and horse, both once broken, now whole again. And in that silent exchange, the story of redemption found its quiet, enduring heartbeat.